look you in the eyes. You're just like an angel, and your skin makes me cry. And you float like a feather.
Good evening from Mint Square. Reality still obeys basic cause and effect, unlike the rest of the world, which now appears to be run on press releases, emergency powers, and very strong vibes. So welcome to live show 160, Who Broke Everything? The only place left where we're allowed to ask the question that's been quietly memory holed everywhere else. How did the people who promised stability manage to break literally everything at the same time? And tonight, Germany is rearming just like it's rediscovered history, but skipped the footnotes. Europe is applauding nervously while checking the exits. And the United States has officially clocked out of the global management like a burnt-out supervisor saying, "I'm done. Don't touch anything. Actually, it's already on fire." And right on schedule, just as Western debt markets start making the same noise a dying printer makes, the next virus is warming up backstage, stretching, hydrating, running media rehearsals, ready to heroically rescue everyone from noticing banks, bonds and balance sheets. Total coincidence, as always. And we'll rewind the tape on how the last empire really collapsed. Not the Hollywood victory lap, but the messy version involving ideology, rot, nationalism leaking through the walls, and elites confidently learning all the wrong lessons while congratulating themselves anyway. We'll step outside the Western bubble and look at how India and Russia are quietly wiring up the multipolar system while Brussels argues about process and Washington insists this was all part of the plan. And of course, everything eventually funnels to artificial intelligence, AI, now plugged into finance, biology, elections, warfare and information itself. The same week it's quietly accelerating every fragile system on Earth. Time magazine names the architects of AI as Person of the Year, which is comforting, very comforting. Nothing says we're in safe hands like handing awards to the people who built the machine while it's still chewing through the wiring. Oh, and before anyone files a report, yes, I am wearing a new NATO certified non-compliant viewer t-shirt, officially unofficial, available in the UK and the US and Australia. Contact us for a price of postage and details, because compliance is optional, but irony is mandatory. So grab a drink, relax and enjoy the show. No slogans, no panic, no approved narratives, just patterns, consequences, and the question nobody wants to ask: who broke everything? This is live show 160, Who Broke Everything, and by the end of tonight we'll have a very clear suspect list. You know the phrase, the new German war machine is back in polite conversation when European think tankers start sweating through their linen shirts. For most of the post-1945 era, the whole point of European security was simple. Germany, big economy, tiny army, supervised like a teenager on probation. Never again meant no tanks rolling east, no tanks rolling west, and definitely no tanks rolling at all without Washington's written permission. Fast forward to now. Berlin is ripping up its own rules, bending the debt brake, throwing tens of billions at the German army, stationing a permanent brigade in Lithuania, and announcing very calmly that it intends to build Europe's strongest conventional army. Not a robust contributor, not a capable ally. No, the strongest. Relax, we're told. This isn't the 1930s cosplay. This is a response to a different circus. An unpredictable United States that might ghost NATO mid-argument, a grinding war in Ukraine, a nuclear-armed Russia parked on the doorstep, and eastern neighbours screaming, "Berlin, stop being a pacifist banana republic and grow some armour." And so the old formula flips. Europe now fears the weak Germany more than the strong one. That's how wild the timeline has become. To get here, Berlin first had to perform financial heresy. The German constitution's debt brake is supposed to be a holy scripture. No big borrowing, no matter how dumb your infrastructure is crumbling. But once the magic word defense enters the chat, suddenly exceptions popping up like mushrooms. Special fund, off-budget magic, all the resources needed. When it's welfare or railways, tut, mehr, lead, kein Geld. When it's tanks, open the vault. But you can't just print soldiers. This is where German reality smashes into German ambitions. You want a serious army? You need people willing to fight, not just sign up for subsidized gym membership in a uniform. For decades, Germany built its identity around being a peaceful export powerhouse. Cars, chemicals, machinery, not heavy armor and national myth. So now Berlin has to sell the public on this extreme awkward pitch. Don't worry, we're still the good guys. We just need a brigade parked 150 kilometers from Russia. Meanwhile, the country is split. The Eastern Länder are more skeptical of NATO crusades, more cynical about Russian bashing, and not thrilled by the idea of becoming a tripwire for World War whatever. Western elites are all in on Zenderwende, historic turning point, heroic role, big speeches, procurement forms in triplicate. And presiding all of this, we have Lithuania deployment, the big test case, a full German brigade of NATO's front line, river crossings under fire, drones overhead, minefields, cyber jamming, artillery duels, Ukraine in high definition, just with the German army branding and better procurement scandals. The paradox, Germany is not the frontline state. In any real clash, the Baltics and Poland eat the initial punch. Germans' job is to logistics spine, railheads, fuel, ammo, reinforcements. If that system works, deterrence might hold. If it doesn't, then all those speeches were just about very expensive Instagram captions. And hovering over the whole thing, the Russia-Ukraine war. One camp wants endless escalation. More weapons, more training, more. We will stand with you as long as it takes. preferably funded by someone else. Another camp says you cannot keep pushing a nuclear power forever and expect a Disney ending. Germany's rearmament sits awkwardly in the middle. Is it a way to stabilise Europe, or a way to make war on European soil thinkable again, but with more paperwork and better branding? Either way, the project is rolling. And speaking of empires rethinking their job description, Germany's trying to become Europe's tank factory, just as the United States quietly updates the fine print on its global role. Which brings us to segment 2 of the show, when the world's former hall monitor writes in official language, "We're tired of managing everyone's chaos." And we're back. So while Germany is dusting off its armour, the United States has just issued what might be the politest resignation letter in imperial history, the 2025 National Security Strategy, NSS. On the surface, it's the usual word salad: peace through strength, American leadership, rules-based order, lots of flag-waving verbs. But buried in the bureaucracy is the quiet confession: we cannot run the whole planet anymore. Also, we don't want to pay for it. For 30 years, the religion in Washington was full-spectrum dominance, the idea that America must be number one on land, sea, air, space, cyberspace, and probably the interpretive dance if necessary. The US would police every sea lane, arbitrate every regional conflict, expand NATO up to whatever map ran out of pixels, topple governments in the name of democracy, and plant bases like Starbucks. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Kosovo, the war on terror. That was the empire burning trillions to prove it could do anything, anywhere, forever. The 2025 document basically says, yeah, about that. Turns out, physics, debt, and public tolerance are a thing. In polite DC dialect, this becomes prioritization, burden sharing, regional sequencing, aligning ends and means. The translation is, we're broke, tired, and the industrial base is held together with duct tape and nostalgia. The new line to allies is savage. You like American security umbrella? Cool. That'll be 5% of GDP, minimum. Pay up or get used to the rain. NATO, once sold as a sacred family, is now a billable service. Europe, after decades of spending on bureaucracy, NGOs, and climate performance art, is being told, if you still want the empire on call, you're going to have to fund the empire on call. Then there's the death of democracy promotion. For years, every invasion and colour revolution came with a moral scaffolding: freedom, human rights, humanitarian intervention. The new strategy quietly shelves that. The line is now, we will still work with countries regardless of governance system. In other words, we've tried exporting democracy. It's expensive, it backfires, and voters at home are asking why their bridges are collapsing while we build parliaments for other people who hate us. Instead, the US wants to shrink the footprint, weaponize tariffs and finance instead of Marines, reindustrialize and recenter the Western Hemisphere. It's basically the Monroe Doctrine 2.0. Latin America, you're ours again. China, kindly back off. Europe, stop calling at 3 a.m. Asia, figure out your own mess. The Middle East, we'll text. The problem, old habits die hard. The DC blob still loves China panic, Middle East obsession, NATO expansion, and of course arms industry revenue streams. So you end up with a split brain. On paper, restraint, focus, limits. In practice, lobbyists, think tanks, and generals saying, one more deployment won't hurt. But even through the noise, the direction is obvious. The unipolar moment is over. The US is downsizing the empire and pretending it's strategy. When one empire is pulling back and another is rearming in confused slow motion, it helps to remember how the last superstate collapsed, not from invasion, but from entropy. Which brings us neatly to segment 3 of our show, how an empire rotted from the inside and how that failure was misread so badly it helped set up the mess we're in now. Everyone likes a clean movie ending for empires. Flag down, statue toppled, heroic speech, credits. The Soviet Union did not collapse like that. It didn't lose a war and surrender. It imploded from ideological exhaustion, economic dysfunction, nationalism, and reforms that tore down the old system faster than anything could replace it. Start with ideology. For decades, the party line was, "You are living in the most advanced society in human history." Meanwhile, people queued for basic goods while the privileged elite enjoyed special lanes, special shops, and special everything. The rhetoric and the lived reality diverged so far they stopped even pretending to intersect. Then the leadership itself changed tune, from world revolution to common European home and shared security. Great for ending the Cold War, but when you switched off the old holy text and don't have a new story ready, the glue dissolves. The empire loses its reason to exist. Economically, it wasn't socialism in the fantasy sense. It was a state monopoly capitalism. The state owned everything, banned independent markets, and wondered why nothing innovative showed up except black markets and corruption. Heavy military spending soaked up resources while consumer goods stayed scarce. When reforms began, they didn't build a new system. They shattered the old one. Result: disorganized transition, not renewal. Imagine demolishing your house before you've drawn the plans up for a new one, and then being surprised you're living in rubble. Politically, opening up created a paradox. To democratize, you had to weaken the very structures that held the multi-ethnic superstate together. But there was no robust courts, no mature parties, no tested institutions waiting in the wings. So when the old ruling apparatus lost legitimacy, especially after the failed coup, there was nothing strong enough to take its place. Into that vacuum surged nationalism. The project of creating a Soviet citizen never fully erased older identities. Russians, Ukrainians, Georgians, Balts, Central Asians all had memories, languages, grievances. Once censorship loosened, these resurfaced with a vengeance. Some republics remembered being independent states. Others felt exploited by Moscow. Others felt they were subsidizing everyone else. The consensus wasn't, let's fix the union, but why are we in this thing at all? The Western policymakers didn't really want total fragmentation. They worried about nuclear weapons spread across multiple new states and preferred some kind of loser reformed union. They warned against suicidal nationalism, not because they hated sovereignty, but because they knew how ugly uncontrolled breakups can get. Too late. Internal dynamics outran external preferences. The failed coup torched off what was left of central authority. The biggest republic essentially shrugged and said, "We're done. That was that." Then came the big narrative scam. Instead of remembering the end of the Cold War as negotiated process where one side deliberately dropped its ideology and allowed Eastern Europe to go its own way, the West rewrote it as, "We won, they lost, history ended, we're the good guys forever now." That little delusion justified everything that came next. NATO expansion up to Russia's borders, bombing campaigns wrapped in humanitarian branding, using the alliance for regime change far beyond its original defence mandate. Missile systems parked even closer, always for our security, never against yours. Ukraine then became the ultimate fault line, multi-identity state with language, politics, competing histories and a very awkward geography was turned into a battering ram of a new containment project. 2014, external meddling and internal fractures, nationalist overreach which equaled predictable explosion. Crimea, a messy, rushed but bloodless separation rooted in a long-standing realities the West pretended didn't matter, until it was useful to pretend they did. None of this excuses invasions. It just explains why reading the latest war as if it was started in 2022 is historically illiterate. And meanwhile, in the present Europe, it is repeating the familiar pattern, misreading history, escalating without a safety architecture and calling it values. Which brings us to the next segment of the show, number 4. When collapsing systems need distraction, they don't send tanks, they send viruses and headlines. You can practically hear the narrative engines warming up in the Western capitals, markets creaking, bond yields twitching, banks looking like exhausted greyhounds forced into one more race and right on schedule. There it is. Experts warn bird flu could be catastrophic if it jumps to humans. Welcome back to Pandemic Prequel, the Cash Reset Edition. We've seen the pattern in 2020. The system was already wheezing, repo markets seizing up, debt bubbles wobbling, central banks panicking behind the scenes. Conveniently, a global emergency arrived that justified trillions of stimulus, bailouts with new branding, emergency powers, and the greatest upward wealth transfer since feudalism. Now, as the West financial engine overheats again, the trailers are rolling out for Pandemic 2. This time, think of the children. Every article is the same structure. If it mutates, if it crosses the species barrier, if it becomes more transmissible, if it hits kids especially hard. It's the conditional tense of doom. We're not reporting reality, we're rehearsing fear. Notice what never gets center stage. Gain of function research, lab safety issues, the fact that some of the same institutions studying these pathogens are also the ones loudly modelling the apocalypse. It's like watching an arsonist lead a fire safety seminar, and of course the golden lever of manipulation returns. It could be particularly dangerous for children. That line unlocks instant compliance. You can't debate, you can't question, and you can't ask awkward fiscal questions, because now it's not about monetary policy or regulatory capture, it's about baby lungs. Meanwhile, the macro story is obvious. Western debt levels are off the charts, interest costs are eating budgets, productivity is stagnant, real wages look like a ski slope. But instead of admitting we've mismanaged the system and it's breaking, you get we must act urgently, protect public health. Act how? Oh, you know the script. Emergency spending, emergency surveillance, emergency censorship, emergency temporary measures that will never quite go away. Monetary reset? No, just unprecedented support. Bank failure? No, just liquidity backstops. Civil rights? No, temporary adjustments to keep you safe. If you're early, you see the pattern. Every structural crisis becomes a medical crisis. Every accountant disaster becomes a public health intervention. Every question about who broke the system gets rerouted to, why do you hate science? And the same media that can't read the balance sheet suddenly transforms into a Greek chorus of virologists, all reciting the same talking points at the same time off the same email chains. Here's the real risk. Once the society normalizes permanent emergency, there's no line they won't cross next time. Lockdowns for viruses, green lockdowns for climate, financial lockdowns for civilities, digital IDs for your safety. Throw in programmable money and central bank digital currencies, and suddenly your health status and your access to money live in the same app. And while the West is busy workshopping Panic Season 2, other players are building something else entirely, long-term, boring structural alternatives. Which brings us to the next segment of the show, number 5. The quiet India-Russia axis, building multipolar plumbing while the old order shouts at the clouds. While Western elites are busy arguing over pronouns, sanctions and WHO emergency frameworks, India and Russia are doing something dangerously unfashionable. Long-term planning. That recent state visit to India wasn't just about protocol and flower arrangements. It was a 25-year report card on a partnership that never had the drama of US alliances, but also never had the divorces. In India political culture, the relationship with Russia is low maintenance and high yield. No moral lectures, no sanctions tantrums, no colour revolution workshops, just energy, heavy industry, defense tech, science, and now financial plumbing. Let's start with oil. When Western sanctions tried to turn Russia crude into radioactive financial waste, India rolled up and said, "How about cheap?" Discount barrels flowed east. India powered its economy, Russia stabilized revenue, and Washington discovered that shouting prior doesn't magically turn off demand. The trade imbalance is huge. Russia exports way more to India than vice versa. The twist? A ton of that is settled in rupees, not dollars. Problem? The rupee isn't a global reserve currency, so Russia ends up with a mountain Everest of rupees that don't travel well. Solution: India quietly tweaks its financial rules to let Russian entities recycle those rupees into India itself. Government bonds, infrastructure, equities. Congratulations, you've just created a sanctions-resistant investment loop. It's not about destroying the dollar, it's about building workarounds, local currency trade, alternative message systems, and digital settlement tools that don't need SWIFT permission slips. Then comes RELOS, RELOS, the logistics agreement. India gets access to Russian ports, including northern ones with Arctic access. Russia gets Indian support options in the Indian Ocean. No flashy bases, just permanent logistic hooks, refuel, repair, resupply. Layer on top, a fast-tracked free trade deal with the Eurasian Economic Union, railway and high-speed train projects, pharmaceutical factories in Russia, new channels for agricultural and seafood exports, and labour mobility schemes for Indian engineers into Russian industry. This is what multipolarity actually looks like, not dramatic speeches, just quiet rewiring of supply chains, payment rails and logistics. Meanwhile, the US is playing bad cop with tariffs, slapping extra duties on Indian exports, demanding India stop buying Russian oil, hinting at sanctions if New Delhi doesn't pick a side. India's response is, "Thanks for your concern, no." New Delhi is happy to buy some US kit, join some Quad statements, smile for a group photo, but it's not about to burn Moscow to impress Washington, especially while Washington is flirting with Beijing one week and lecturing India about values the next. Then there's the China Triangle. Russia is tight with China. India has real border issues with China, yet all three end up in the same rooms, BRICS, SCO, RIC formats, trying to manage friction without blowing up the entire continent. From Moscow's perspective, the dream is a greater Eurasia, Russia as an energy and logistics spine, China as manufacturing giant, India as services and tech and demographic engine. The West can scoff, but that's where the population, resources and growth are. And India? It's playing the long, patient game. Work with the US where useful, deepen ties with Russia, manage, not love China. Court and the global south with no strings attached infrastructure deals, and chair BRICS in 2026 with a very full agenda. Which sets up our next escalation beautifully, because if you're building a multipolar with custom payment rails, logistic chains and energy corridors, the last thing you want to do is hand the keys to an entire system, to an unregulated global AI stack designed in California and trained on Twitter. So let's talk about that. All right, time to talk about our new unelected overlord, artificial intelligence. The thing every corporate press release calls transformative, while quietly building the tools to collapse whatever is left of society. Of course, the sales pitch is simple. More productivity, more healthcare, smarter cities, personalized everything. The part that gets skipped over is on slide 32. We are wiring increasingly capable AI into systems that are already fragile, already captured, and already unaccountable. Start with finance. Your money is not gold in a vault, it's numbers in databases. If a sufficiently skilled attacker, human or AI assisted, corrupts the ledgers, liquidates holdings, or scrambles the records, the legal theory of you will still own it, is about as comforting as a receipt from a burnt down shop. Now imagine AI tools doing automated exploit generation, ultra-tailored phishing at population scale, and intelligent lateral movement inside networks. Suddenly, your too big to fail bank looks more like too digital to trust. Move to biology. Once upon a time, building a designer pathogen required cutting-edge expertise and a serious lab. Now, AI models assist with protein design, genome editing, and experiment planning. You don't hand apocalypse powers to script kiddies, but you definitely lower the barrier for rogue states, doomsday cults, or just very serious people in very serious labs with very stupid ideas. Now blend in elections and information. The algorithmic manipulation we already have is bad enough. Feeds turned into outrage, polarization, and dopamine. Upgrade that with AI that can build detailed psych profiles from your data, generate endless custom propaganda, and test 10,000 narrative variations per hour. And the result? Each voter lives inside a personalized hallucination where reality itself is A/B tested. Meanwhile, politicians talk about AI guidelines and ethic frameworks like it's going to fix everything. The real governors are ad revenue, engagement metrics, shareholder pressure, and geopolitical arm races. Then we get to lethal autonomous weapons, drones that identify and kill targets without a human pressing the trigger at the moment. Sentry systems that decide when to fire, swarms coordinating attacks on their own. Even if they never go rogue, they already shift the calculus of war. If you can fight with expendable machines instead of conscripts, domestic political costs plummets. If you can wage wars with fewer funerals, that's not stability, that's a discount on aggression. And looming above all this is the big one, superintelligence. If we ever build systems vastly smarter than us across the board, we become to them what cows and raccoons are to us, background fauna. And we can talk about off switches all we like, but if the system is truly smarter, it will think about our switches before we do. Alignment, making sure it doesn't want to kill or enslave us, is not a feature you patch in later like dark mode. It's the whole ball game. And right now, the money and attention going to alignment is a rounding error compared to product launches and hype. And the creepiest part, in private, many insiders admit they're worried about mass job loss, permanent surveillance, power concentrating in a handful of companies, catastrophic misuse, and long-term existential risk. In public, they smile and say, "We're excited to partner with educators and small businesses." So now we have collapsing trust in institutions, brittle infrastructure, weaponizing narratives, and now an intelligence accelerant poured over the whole mess. And that's where we'll leave it tonight. Not with solutions, not with optimism, but with comforting knowledge that at least everyone who broke everything is still very confident and well paid. Because really, what could go wrong? Germany is rearming. America's clocked out. The next virus is doing warm-ups behind the curtain. And we've plugged artificial intelligence into finance, biology, elections, warfare, and social reality itself, without reading the manual, without installing guardrails, and without appointing anyone whose job description includes the words long-term consequences. But relax. We're told it's all under control. The same people who missed every financial crash, every war escalation, every supply chain collapse, and every unexpected crisis that are now assuring us that this time they've definitely got it covered. What could be more reassuring? AI won't destabilize anything, it'll just optimize it. Optimize your bank access, optimize your news feeds, optimize your political opinions, optimize your immune system, possibly right out of existence. And if anything goes wrong, don't worry. There's already a committee, a slogan, a press conference, and an emergency funding package waiting to explain why it wasn't anyone's fault and why you're being irresponsible for noticing. So remember, if the lights go out, the money vanishes, the narrative flips overnight, or a brand new crisis drops like a surprise album, stay calm. It's probably for your safety. And if you've got questions, please direct them to the nearest chatbot. That's it for tonight. Sleep well, trust the experts, and whatever you do, don't ask who broke everything. Good night. Bye.